Hello, everybody. Welcome back to AP World History with Mr. Ansharsky. That's me. So this presentation is still in Unit 5, Chapter 4, talking about the start of the Industrial Revolution. So your bell work is on screen right here. Compare and contrast the French, American, and Haitian revolutions. All right. So this unit is entitled Revolutions, as you all know by now. And one of these revolutions is going to be a change in the economy, which therefore is going to have a lot of political and social implications. And this, of course, is the Industrial Revolution. So the lesson objectives for today explain how environmental factors contributed to industrialization in this time period, 1750 to 1900, and then explain how different modes and locations of production have changed and developed over time. So modes of production, how production is done, location, obviously where production is done. But what do we mean by the term Industrial Revolution? Well, let's take a look at that. The Industrial Revolution, or revolutions as I'll talk about, is a series of economic, environmental, and social changes that are the result of new technologies that will emerge by the end of the 18th century. So the Industrial Revolution, as we will see, it will begin in Great Britain. That's important to remember. It will begin in Great Britain, and it will see the application of these new inventions to the economy, to industry, to manufacturing. And some of the inventions, we'll talk about them more in detail. We're going to see the use of the steam engine, especially. A lot of steampunk cosplay emerges. Anyway, the steam engine is a very important invention that will contribute to industrialization, as we will see. We will see the emergence of mechanization, of mechanized or machine manufacturing. And we'll also see, of course, new technology that relates to transportation and communication, as we will see. But I mentioned before that there are technically two revolutions in this period of economic change. Well, there are. There's the first industrial revolution, about a 100-year period, 1750 to 1850. This is a time period when we see power mostly being generated through things like wind, through water mills, through animals. However, we are going to see the start of the use of fossil fuels, of coal, in this first industrial revolution. And what is this industrial revolution focusing on? It's textiles, cotton textiles. That's the big thing to remember about the first industrial revolution. And then we're going to see a second half of the industrial revolution, the so-called, aptly named, second industrial revolution. This is a period that will lead us into the 20th century. It's mostly focused on the production of chemicals, of steel. We're seeing the generation of electricity and the heavy use of fossil fuels, at first coal, and later on, petroleum or oil. So this is an overview of the Industrial Revolution. It's a change in the economy, which will have social and political implications. Let's get started with looking at some of the reasons why the Industrial Revolution will occur. Well, there are three reasons, as we'll talk about. There's the increase of global population, there's the increase of trade infrastructure, and there is the development of new inventions, the invention of new inventions, as I think I said in class. I'm a very literate sort of person. But let's first look at population growth. What is leading to the Industrial Revolution in terms of population growth? Well, it's yet another revolution. It is the so-called Second Agricultural Revolution. And The agricultural revolution, occurring in the 1600s to about the end of the 1800s, it is a period where we will see new agricultural inventions, new agricultural techniques. And the overall impact of these new techniques is new population growth. It is increased population growth, I should say. So we're seeing the adoption of new agricultural techniques, of new inventions. And part of this is a result of that Columbian exchange we talked about in Unit 4. So we see the use of the potato in places like Great Britain. Potatoes obviously are wonderful because they are a very durable crop. And you have all of these new foods from the old world or from the new world in the old world. And this is increasing diets. It is making them more variable. It's making them more varied. So more varied food sources. This is leading to longer life expectancies. It's leading to more food overall. And of course, more food means more people. More people means more workers. That's the important part of the agricultural revolution. So this idea of workers, more workers, that is one of the big results of the agricultural revolution. You see the development of new technologies, as I said before. You start to see the widespread application of crop rotation. So you're not growing the same thing in a field, you're allowing the nutrients to regenerate. You have synthetic or chemical fertilizers, and that allows for soil to be more productive. And you also see changes in animal husbandry. So there are new ways of breeding cattle, of breeding animals. And this is going to have an impact of more food sources, meaning more food, meaning more people, meaning more workers. That's kind of the logic there. So the agricultural revolution, in the sense of these new technologies, is leading to an increase in the labor pool. And before I continue on with this explanation of the agricultural revolution, I want to bring up something before we continue. And this is the idea of the factors of industrialization. The helpful acronym there is CEL. So what is CEL? CEL is capital, entrepreneurship, land, and labor. So in order to industrialize, you need capital, meaning the money to buy the machines. You need entrepreneurship, meaning the people who put up the capital to buy the machines. You need land to build the factories, and land could also mean natural resources. And you need workers, you need labor. And right now, because of the agricultural revolution, we got more labor. But what else about the agricultural revolution is contributing to the industrial revolution? Well, it is a movement known as the Enclosure Movement. And let me describe what that is. So before I even do that, let me set the stage of what Great Britain is like in terms of land ownership. Well, throughout the Middle Ages, most farmland was under what we call the open field system. About half of British land is a part of this open field system. Basically, there are three big fields in a village. One is for crops, for example. One is for sheep, and the other is for a different type of crop, for example. And there's also a central kind of area known as the commons. And this is used by everyone in a village. Remember, under feudalism, under serfdom, a landlord gives out or has land, and on that land is peasants. The peasants produce for the noble, but the noble didn't really divide up land for the peasants. It was up for the peasants to decide how that was used. And in this open field system, there is a great amount of communal property ownership. No one dominates in terms of land ownership, in the village anyway. So we have the we have common land, which is used by everyone in the village, and really, the open field system creates a heavy sense of community. And it also prevents this idea of privatization, that a single individual owns all this land. However, we're going to see this definition of communal land ownership change in the enclosure movement. We are going to enclose or cut up these huge estates, and they are owned by private land owners. So let's talk about the enclosure movement. Well, increasingly, because of the rise of the middle class, we see this very ingrained definition of private property ownership. Remember, private property, that's a natural right. And if we want a society that respects natural right, we need to encourage private property ownership. So we will see the rise of the middle class politically in Great Britain. They will come to dominate Parliament. And in Parliament, they are going to pass a bunch of laws to privatize that open field system. The open field system is seen as encouraging laziness. We need to get rid of that to encourage a thriving working class, a thrifty working class, to quote Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life. So throughout the early 19th century, we will see the privatization of this open field system in about 3,000 parliamentary acts. And this benefits big landowners. They own all of this land now. And the peasants or the farmers who stay on that land, they have to pay rents. They either have to pay rents or they're just kicked off of that land. They become vagrants, to use derogatory language, or derisive language, not derogatory. Anyway, don't call someone a vagrant. But anyway, we are seeing a mass movement that is kicking farmers off of their land. So we have a whole bunch of people because there's new types of food, but we have a limited space for these people to work as farmers. The land is now owned by huge land owners, and we don't have this open field system anymore. So increasingly, we will see these former farmers becoming a part of the industrial working class. So in this way, the enclosure movement is encouraging the labor pool needed for industrialization, but is also encouraging the land needed for industrialization. A private individual now owns this land. This land could be used to build a factory. So in this way, the agricultural revolution, with the enclosure movement involved in this, is encouraging new labor sources, and it's encouraging land for factory building. And before I move on, it's important to remember that it is this middle class that is dominating British politics, and it will dominate European politics, as we will see later on. So Parliament is going to pass a lot of laws that favor this middle class, privatizing land, but also a group of laws known as the Corn Laws. And the Corn Laws are tariffs, so taxes on imported goods. They're tariffs on foreign food. So tariffs have the overall impact of driving up prices for domestic internal goods. It is making foreign goods really, really expensive. There's no competition. Guess who can charge what they want? It's domestic landowners. So the Corn Laws represent the dominance of this emerging middle class in British politics. They want to encourage wealth for domestic private land owners. So at the expense of the wealthy, the peasantry is kicked off of their land, and now they're industrial workers. Awesome. Well, we have, not really, but we have two factors of industrialization. We have land development and we have a new labor source. And this is just to visualize what we mean by the enclosure movement. So you have the kind of parceling out to families, but no one completely owns this land. It is, in the community sense, operated communally as a community. However, as a result of things like the enclosure movement, we see the consolidation of all these lands into the ownership of a single individual or a company. So the Industrial Revolution is being preceded by this agricultural revolution. As you can see right here, the population of the world is exponentially rising. We have so much new food because we have so much new access to food. Awesome. So think about this question right here. What was the impact of the second agricultural revolution? And explain how it impacts the Industrial Revolution. By the way, as a side note, I was about to ask, does anyone know the first? No, the first agricultural revolution was the literal invention of farming. So don't get them confused. So what else is encouraging industrialization? Well, let's look at capital and entrepreneurship and a bit at land again. So another reason I should say, why we see industrialization, especially in Great Britain, is the improvement of infrastructure needed for trade. We see really throughout Europe because of state centralization, what we talked about in Unit 3. We see improved infrastructure that is encouraging trade and land development. We have roads, awesome, we can do trade. We have dams and levees and we're draining swamps. This means there is more land either for farms or factories. So we see increased government involvement in encouraging this factor of industrialization. We have better transportation. We have better land for development. We also see government structures that support trade. Well, we see infrastructure, as I've been saying, but we also see stock markets emerging. We see them in the Netherlands, in Great Britain. But then tying us to Unit 4, we also see the expansion of colonial markets. So we see the establishment of colonies in the New World and economic trading presence throughout the Indian Ocean, for example. And these colonies, they do two things. One, they provide raw materials, and two, they are a market for industrially made goods. There is an incentive to make industrially made goods so you can sell them to the colonies. So we have trade routes with countries that basically can't refuse, the colonies. So this is going to benefit European powers at home. They will be able to industrialize. They have the markets to sell the goods. They have the raw materials to make the goods. But we're also seeing the development that is in tandem with the rise of the middle class. We see the creation of what we call consumer culture. So within this property middle class, they have the money to buy industrially made goods. So there is a market, a demand for industrially produced goods. This is leading to an incentive to produce those industrially made goods to meet demand. And one of these initial industrially made goods is textiles. Textiles using cotton, especially from the colonies. In Great Britain's case, it's using cotton at first from the American South. But as it expands into places like India or Egypt, this is where the cotton is coming from. And we'll talk about that expansion a bit in the second to last presentation of this unit and throughout Unit 6. Unit 6, all about imperialism. But finally, we have a logistic reason why we see the Industrial Revolution. Well, there are new inventions to make goods. There are new inventions to support industrial economies. So you should be familiar with at least 3 from this list right here. So in 1712, we have the invention of the steam engine. The steam engine uses fuel to produce power. And this power can generate machines. These machines could be factories, or they could be railroads, they could be steamships. So we have the mode of production that is being changed, and we also have the distribution of produced goods that is being changed. So thank you, Thomas Newcomen. And we'll talk about the steam engine more later in this presentation. But as I said, we have new changes in how we produce goods. We will see the invention of things like the spinning jenny. We will see inventions like the power loom. The spinning jenny essentially turns cotton fibers into yarn, and then the yarn will eventually be processed through the power loom to make textiles. So that's what those two are. The spinning jenny makes yarn, the power loom makes textiles out of yarn. We see improvements in the acquisition of the raw materials with the cotton gin. The cotton gin takes the cotton ball, basically, with the seed still in, and it removes the seed. Awesome. You can just get the fibers. You don't need the seed. Thank you, Eli. Well, I mean, don't thank Eli Whitney, because this makes cotton more valuable, and who, produces cotton? It's African slaves. So never mind. Eli Whitney, bad. Okay. And we see a development in communication with the telegraph at first, sending electronic signals invented by Samuel Morse. But eventually we will see more modern, recognizable communication, like the telephone, literally sending sound over vast distances. And we'll talk about this significance at the end of the presentation. But we're also seeing changes in the factory, not only with the textiles, but in the actual workplace environment. And we're going to see that with the invention of the light bulb. The light bulb is going to change how production is done, because it means you can be open for longer periods of time. No longer is it sunrise to sunset, sunrise, sunset. No, sunrise to sunset. You could work a potentially 24-hour day. It is increasing working hours, which therefore increases productivity, which therefore increases profitability. That's the logic there. So we got those 3 reasons why industrialization will occur. We have the agricultural revolution. We have these new inventions. We have what I talked about on the last slide. We have new infrastructure to support industrialization. So this slide has to do with capital mostly. It has to do with the machines in these factories. All right, let's keep going. So I said at the beginning that Great Britain is the first place to industrialize. And why is that? Well, it is going to industrialize first for 4 reasons. And what are they? For one thing, Great Britain is the dominant colonial superpower. It has access to a lot of raw materials needed in production. So it has a lot of raw materials. It has the land component of sell. It also has a lot of markets to sell those industrially made goods because they have colonies. Awesome. This encourages industrialization. You have demand for industrially made goods. You also have a lot of resources even within Great Britain. You have a lot of coal. You have a lot of iron. You need coal for fuel. You need iron for machines. So again, relating to land, but also to capital. And on top of that, transportation is really easy in Great Britain. especially because of the plentiful amount of waterways. You have a lot of room for transportation. And waterways are great for two reasons. One, you can transport goods easier. But two, in this initial period of industrialization, in the first industrial revolution, these factories are powered with water mills. So a lot of these factories are along waterways. But what else is leading to industrialization in Great Britain? Well, you have the entrepreneurship aspect. So British society is very much more fluid than European society, than continental European society, I should say. The middle class has a pretty significant position in British society, even before this Enlightenment revolutionary period. So the middle class, as the group of people leading industrialization, groups like merchants, like artisans, these sorts of people, it is encouraging capitalist growth. It is encouraging entrepreneurship. Hey, I want to make a quick buck selling stuff. That's basically what capitalism and entrepreneurship is. So British society encourages entrepreneurship because it is less restrictive based on a noble hierarchy. There is a nobility, sure, but the middle class is not to be ignored. They are an important force in British society, so they are going to develop this new industrialization. So a businessman with enough money can be involved in politics, can be involved even in the aristocracy. So it is a much more fluid society that is encouraging industrialization. It is encouraging entrepreneurship. But why is the rest of Europe going to industrialize? Well, it's going to industrialize because, one thing, science is cool, basically. There is increasing middle-class interest in technology. And we'll see that when we talk about positivism. This idea of applying science to society. So science and its fashionability is going to be a reason why European middle-class people will eventually want to adopt industrialization. We want technology, basically. They're the Brotherhood of Steel. Never mind. But we also see the political and economic and social rise of this middle class through things like the various revolutions we've talked about, Revolution of 1830, Revolution of 1848. And this middle class is growing in its political importance. It is ascending, meaning governments in continental Europe are more open to middle class interests, especially if middle class interest is in industrialization. So we see industrial growth as middle class grows in its importance. That's important to remember. So that's why continental Europe is going to industrialize. That's why Great Britain was the first to industrialize. And again, looking at geography, it never goes away. Great Britain has a whole bunch of coal. It has a whole bunch of iron. This is one of the reasons why Great Britain will industrialize first. The Industrial Revolution is changing how we produce things. So we're going to see a change and adoption of new production methods, of new inventions. Let's take a look at a few new production methods. So we see the development of mass production. And what is mass production? Well, it is the manufacture of little bitty identical products. And eventually these itty bitty identical products, they are put together by other workers, and they are going to be made into a final product. It's dividing labor into smaller tasks to build something, to build the whole of something. Basically, think the assembly line. So if we use cars as an example of mass production, there is one team of workers that makes the car frame. There's another team of workers that puts the doors on, for example. So it's dividing labor into repetitive, easy to repeat tasks. And overall, the impact of mass production is increasing productivity. It is increasing the ability to produce. And where do we first see this? We are going to first see this in the pottery or ceramics industry. So we'll see that because of this dude right here. I think he has a lazy eye. Never mind. His name is Josiah Wedgwood. Wedgwood is an English industrialist who is going to use these ideas of mass production and apply them to ceramics. One group of workers, they make the tea cup. One group of workers, they attach the tea cup to the tea handle. Boom. One group of workers, they dye the final product. So Wedgwood is introducing these techniques of mass production, of the division of labor into manufacturing. And this is going to increase productivity. It will decrease costs because it costs less to pay someone who is skilled to make pottery. And it is increasing profitability for these industrialists. So increasingly, we see the use of mass production in industry, which is leading to increased production, therefore leading to increased profitability for the factory owners. And one of the important things we see, and something that will fundamentally shift how production is viewed, is this idea of mechanization. And we're going to first see this in the cotton industry, in the textile industry, I should say. It is the use of machines to produce something, basically. That's what mechanization is. And it's largely the result of these factors of industrialization, of sell. So we have the capital, because England has a lot of money now, capital to buy further capital, meaning machines. We have the rise of the middle class, the entrepreneur class. We have the use of land from the Enclosure Movement, the natural resources from the colonies. And we also see a labor source, the dispossessed farmers, these new industrial working class people. So mechanization is going to fundamentally change where production is done. Before, it was in the cottage industry, in the so-called putting out system. One household, they'll produce a quota of textiles to produce, and then some guy will sell those textiles. That's kind of what the putting out system is. But now, all of that production is not done in the home, it's done in another building, a factory. And these factories operated with machines. These machines operated by workers. So at the first industrial revolution, again, it is this focus in the textile industry, especially cotton from the American colonies when they were colonies, and then the United States when it gets independent. And the second industrial revolution will also see mechanization, but we'll see a more widespread adaptation of the steam engine. And we're going to see more of a use and focus in steel and electricity and chemicals, but still using these techniques of mechanization, of mass production. And mechanization is going to spread to different countries. It will spread to the United States. It will spread to Great Britain, or well, it starts in Great Britain. It will spread to continental Europe, and it will spread eventually to Japan. The adoption of mechanization in the US is a little funny. There's this businessman, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he is going to go to England and he's like, that's how a machine works. I'm going to take some notes down, do a little sketch, and then I'm going to go back to the US and I'll adopt these ideas in my own factory. Japan does something a little similar. Japan, as we'll talk about in Unit 6, they will send a lot of foreign observers to European countries, and they are going to see what works, what doesn't work, how can we keep up with Europeans? Let's adopt mechanization. So with the opening of trade relations, we will see even more industrial production in places like Japan, in the United States. And again, the second revolution, just before I go on, very much defined by fossil fuels, coal and petroleum, which is then turned into oil. What are some of the major innovations that will influence how we will industrially produce goods? Well, let's look at 3 of them. So we're going to see a shift in the iron industry as a result of the Industrial Revolution. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, iron making sucks. It's very expensive, very hard process. And for one thing, you need a lot of fuel. You need wood. The problem is, because there is a demand for iron, there is going to be a demand, therefore, for fuel, for wood. So we will see a lot of deforestation even before the Industrial Revolution begins. We have to turn to a new source. And what's that source? It's coal. So increasingly, we will see a shift away from skilled labor and the use of lumber towards the use of coal, especially as we will see the use of coke. And what is coke? Well, coke is a American soft drink. No, coke is a type of coal with all the impurities baked out of it, essentially. And coke is really great because it is a super fuel source. It's kind of dirty in a way, but it is very hot. And it is going to allow for very quick, very cheap production of iron. So it's less quality iron, but it's so much faster to make. You don't need skilled labor. You can just have any Joe Schmo with a hammer do it. And eventually we will see, by the second Industrial Revolution, the use of steel, the production of higher quality iron. All right, let's go on from there. So we are going to see changes in how production is done, but we'll also see changes in how business is done. So let's first look at the steam engine, because that will have 2 impacts. One, the steam engine is going to impact production, is going to move factories away from natural power sources like wind, like water, like animal, like human power. And it is going to move factories inland. And this is the result of James Watts. Watts was a Scottish inventor who is going to improve upon the steam engine. He is going to realize that the steam engine can not only be used for factories, but it can also be used for transportation, for railroads, for steamships. So we will see the spread of this steam technology to railroads and ships. And the ships we have to thank Robert Fulton for. But what's the overall impact of this? Well, the steam engine is not only changing where factories can be, but it's also changing how fast we can move raw materials, how fast we can move final products. And that's a significant change. A railroad, it can go up to 35 miles an hour. It's a little funny. Thomas Jefferson, when he heard about how fast these railroads could go, at the time, 15 miles an hour, he was like, this is unnatural. We could break our necks if we went 15 miles an hour. So it is changing how fast transportation can be done. It is moving goods a lot quicker. It is encouraging more trade. It is encouraging a demand for industrially produced goods. And similarly, we will see developments in communication, especially at first with the electric telegraph. The telegraph allows for long distance, very quick communication. So the telegraph is going to be instrumental in transnational, international business. We're going to see the first Atlantic telegraph line being laid in the 1840s. This allows business to be done between companies in Great Britain, companies in places like the United States. It is encouraging trade. It is encouraging oceanic connections. So this encouragement of trade is leading to the rise of transnational businesses, businesses that do trade across national boundaries. And as such, it is going to encourage new ways of doing trade. We will see the application of the steamship. We will see the building of things like the Panama Canal. It's encouraging this exchange of raw materials and industrially produced goods. So this is going to not only encourage more industrialization back in Europe, back in Great Britain, back in the United States, but it's also building international connections, economic connections. Some countries, as we will talk about later in this unit, actually, and in next unit, they are going to be the exporters of raw materials. And this is going to have profound economic and political implications. So the growth of international business as a result of the telegraph is leading to increased and renewed definitions of who controls trade. All right, thank you very much for watching. There are a few videos attached to this presentation that go more in depth into the technology, into the enclosure movement, into the Industrial Revolution as a whole. But this is where I will leave you off today. Thank you for watching. Again, I don't remember if I said it in the intro, Mr. Ancharsky's AP World History, Chapter 4. Yep. Bye.